Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Okay. Is it working okay now? Yeah. You can see me? Okay. Okay, inshallah, in today's talk, we will continue our session regarding the life of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu an, and we will talk about the conquest of Bilad al-Sham, or the area of Levant, which is called Syria. As I said, when we say the translation of Sham to Syria means the whole area that includes Syria, Jordan, Palestine, and Lebanon of today. So all those four countries are part of Syria or Sham, which is mentioned here. Now, we talked about the conquest of Damascus or Damascus yesterday. We will briefly go over just about Fihl, how it was opened, Homs, and Caesarea or Qanasarin, and then we'll talk about Jerusalem, or which is called Elia or Beit al-Maqdis, whichever way name we are familiar with. Inshallah, we'll talk about that. Now, after the conquest of Damascus or the Damascus, most of the armies of the Byzantine or the Romans, which were defeated by the Muslims, whether that or others, they were gathering at the area called Fihl. And in Fihl, they were gathering there, and this was a Byzantine city. And the Muslims, they sent their the army in that area as well. And in that area, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu an was the one who was leading the army. And among them, the way the army was distributed, or the military was distributed, it was in the way that the vanguard was, the leadership was Khalid bin Walid radiallahu an. Right flank was Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, and the left flank was Amr bin al-As. Cavalry was Dirar ibn al-Azur, and infantry under the leadership of Iyad ibn Ghanam. And general command of the troops went to Shahbil ibn Hasana, because the site of the battle was in the area that was under his command. As we talked about that, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah was in general was the leader of the army. Now, Muslims, they seized the Fihl, and we will see that in general when we are talking about the area of Sham, that they were living in different fortresses, and they used to get in themselves inside the fortresses. And then they were also digging up the trenches, and they were using the forts and the trenches as way of defending themselves for any kind of a foreign aggression or any kind of a military enforcement from outside, or goes any attack from outside. When it comes to the Byzantines, and when we're talking about the Romans, they were led by Saqlab ibn Mikhraq, and they attacked the Muslims who rose up against them as one, because they were because all these armies of the Byzantine, they rose up against the Muslims because they were being defeated in different parts of the Sham, and they were gathering. And now this battle started until the daybreak, and then went to all day until night fell. So this is after the siege was there, and then they came out, they fought. The battle, as I said, it lasted for about from day until the night. And when it grew dark, the Byzantines fled, and the leader was killed. So, and the Muslims set out in pursuit and drove them in their defeat to that muddy area. So that the area of the Fihl, what they did was they dug up the trenches, and they changed the direction of the river towards those trenches, and they became like a lot of muddy area over there. And but Muslims were able to pass through that, and they opened up al-Fihl. And after that, the conquest of Baisan and Tabariya happened, And the Battle of Homs happened in the 15th year after the Hijrah. And the Homs was led by Khalid bin Walid, radiallahu an. And this was the 15th year after the Hijrah. And after that, Abu Ubaidah sent Khalid bin Walid to Qinsarin, which is in the 15th year of the after Hijrah as well. And when he reached it, his people had his people and the Christian Arabs. So there were Arabs who were Christians as well, besides the people of Qinsarin. They revolted. They revolted against him, and Khalid fought with them, and they killed them many. As for the Byzantines who were there, he utterly destroyed them, and killed their leader. His name was Minas. The Bedouin there apologized to him and saying that the fighting was not their idea. Khalid accepted the apology, and then they came under the leadership of the Muslims. And then, which is called Caesarea, from Caesar or Caesarea, there was a battle happened after 15 years of Hijrah. During the same year, Umar appointed Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan, in charge of Caesarea, and wrote him saying, I have appointed you in charge of Caesarea. Go there and seek the help of Allah against them, and say La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah aliyyul azim. And he is the best of the help, which means basically Allah the Almighty, the Most High, the Almighty is our Lord, our trust, and our hope and our helper. And he is the best of helpers and the best of the supporters. So he went and did the siege of the city over there as well. People came out to fight in numerous times, and last of which was a battle in which they fought intensely, and Muawiyah strove hard against them, and until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them victory. So that was about the Caesarea. And now we talk a little bit briefly about the Jerusalem, which is the main topic today, inshallah, how the Muslims were able to open Jerusalem, Jerusalem or Bayt al-Maqdis. Now, in Jerusalem, which is Al-Quds, and it's also, we can see in the historical books as called Elia as well. They had the in charge of Byzantine over there was Artabun. Artabun was second in if you want to look at the order of the ruling after the Caesar or Caesar. The next person in line, or second person in line, was Artabun. So he's the most senior commander. So he's the second in command of the emperor. And he was famous for his brilliance in fighting among the Byzantines. And he has a deep insight about how to fight and how to use different kinds of natural ways of defending himself. So he put a large number of troops in Ramallah and Elia. And Amr bin al-As wrote to Umar al-Khattab, informing him of that and asking him for advice and instruction. Umar said these famous words: "We have sent against Artabun of the Byzantines, the Artabun of the Arabs. Let us see how things will work out." So now he's referring to Amr bin al-As radiallahu an as the Artabun of the Muslims or the Arabs, meaning he's referring to that he is Amr al-As himself was a great fighter. He was not, of course, he was a son of As bin Wa'il, another he was a kafir. He died as a non-believer, one of the enemies of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But from his lineage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought a great Sahabi, Amr bin al-As radiallahu anh, and he was a great general during the days of Jahiliyyah, and after he became Muslim, he will continue to be a great general. Like we can talk about the Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anh, same way. His father was Walid bin Mughira, another leader of the kuffar who was a staunch enemy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But from the loin of the same person, Khalid bin Walid came. And even though there were times that Khalid bin Walid fought against the Muslims, but once he became Muslim, he was referred as Sayfullah, the sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh referred to Amr bin al-As as the Artabun of the Muslim of the Arabs. He was a great So there's Artabun, famous Artabun of the Byzantine. So we have the Artabun, which is Amr bin al-As. And he meant it for both leaders were the smartest among their people. So he is praising Artabun. He's not saying the Artabun is nobody, but he said mentioning Amr bin al-As, that he is another great general, and inshallah the victory will come from him, basically. So now this battle of Jerusalem began before the second battle of Ajnadin. So we talked about Ajnadin, battle of Ajnadin prior, and now it is now inshallah try to make some connection to that battle also, because we talked about that when we were talking about Yarmouk, because Yarmouk was around the same time and Ajnadin was happening, and that was one of the building blocks or main foundation towards the victory against the Romans or the Byzantines. So now here, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, his plan was to distract the Byzantines from Amr bin al-As in Palestine until the victory was achieved against the troops in Ajnadin. So he distracted them by sending different armies in different regions of the Byzantines, as we talked about that in the previous talks as well. Now here, when all these battles were happening and the Muslims were able to siege the Jerusalem, and this siege was, of course, the way the siege was, the way the Artabun was protecting Jerusalem or Elia was behind the very huge walls, and those walls also had catapults to throw big stones or rocks at the other army at far distances. And then he had archers, he had people with the swords and armors, and all those people were there to protect the city. Now, they siege for a long period of time under the leadership of Amr bin al-As. Now, about this siege, what we find is there are many different reports about that what exactly happened that after the siege, because it's not only Amr bin al-As, but rather the reports that talk about the issue of Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu anh also joined the army of Amr bin al-As, and then Khalid bin Walid also came, and hence the city was surrounded by different armies under the different generals of the Muslims. But Amr bin al-As was the one, as most of the report talk about, was the main person who was fighting, who was leading the army against Artabun and the Jerusalem. So now here, after some siege, some of these Byzantines, they come out and they fought a battle, and in this, it was a showdown between the Artabun of the Arabs and the Artabun of the Byzantines. So the Roman general was defeated and fled with his troop to seek protection within the walls of the holy city. So first of all, some fight happened, and then he went inside and stayed there. At-Tabri says that Al-Qama, Masruq, and Muhammad bin Amr, Abu Ayyub all joined Amr in Ajnadin, and Amr marched with the entire army to Elia to lay to siege. Now, as Muslims were gathered and they were there, Al-Waqidi describes the walls of the city as being fortified with catapults, swords, shields, and the people. And there was, so it's the fort or a garrison, you want to call it. They were well protected, and so the siege was going on. But on the 11th day, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah also came, and he joined the Muslims. And then he was accompanied by Khalid and Abdurrahman bin Abi Bakr, and the Muslim cavalry and the champion of the Tawheed by the people. Now, when all these armies joined, the people of Elia or Jerusalem, they panicked. And it says that the siege went on for about 4 months. And there was no day on which there was some fighting was not happening. And there was some, we know in the area of Jerusalem, they do have snow over there as well. It's a cold time and they have rain, but Muslims continue the siege. And now the Byzantines despaired of resisting the Muslim siege of their city. The patriarch of the Christians, his name was Sophronius, decided to stage a final attempt. And he wrote the letter to Amr bin al-As, was a commander, and urging him to lift the siege because it was impossible for him to occupy the city. So he's trying to say, you cannot do anything, so let's finish the siege and get over with it. Now, Byzantines, or Tabun, wrote to Amr bin al-As saying, you are my friend and my counterpart, because he also understood Amr bin al-As is the one who's leading the army on the other side, so it's a counterpart. So he said, your position among your people is like my position among my people. By Allah, you will not conquer any part of Palestine after Ajnadin. So go back and do not be deceived, lest you be defeated like those who came before you. Now, Amr bin al-As only sent one statement. He said, I am the one who is going to conquer this land. Now, this was a strange statement. That's one statement he's sending back to them. He sent a letter, and Artabun read the letter of Amr and he laughed at what was written in and he said, and he replied, the one who is going to conquer Bayt al-Maqdis is the one whose name is Umar. So Artabun is giving a hint here that it will be taken by not Amr bin al-As, but rather Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu. He said just Umar, but it was understood he's referring to the Khalifa is the one, if he comes, he'll be able to conquer it. And there are other reports that talk about the very same issue, that they were aware of some of the reports regarding who's the person who is going to conquer Bayt al-Maqdis. And they, in their scriptures, they had some reports regarding the description of the person who will come and conquer Bayt al-Maqdis. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, because when Umar received this letter, when he came, they were able to recognize Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh from his description as well, the way Umar bin Khattab was. But anyways, regardless, when Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh was informed of what Artabun said, so there are different reports that talk about that. So one of them said it was the Artabun who sent this. One says that the people of the Bayt al-Maqdis, who's the one who offered this. But either way, it is, at the end of the day, is the Byzantines. From them, there was a approach came to the Muslims towards them, that is the Umar al-Khattab that they are after, that if he comes, then they are able to strike a treaty. So they are talking about a treaty over here. They are talking about giving up with certain conditions that they had. Now, there are different reports mentioned, as I mentioned. Tabri says that he says that the siege of the Jerusalem, which was besieged by Amr bin al-As radiallahu anh, says that the reason why Umar came to Syria was that Abu Ubaidah was besieging Jerusalem. And it is people who asked him to make a peace deal with them along the same lines as the peace deal with the other cities of Syria. And that one who draw up the treaty should be Umar bin Khattab. So he wrote to Umar telling him about that, and came from Medina after appointing Ali radiallahu anh as in charge when Umar was not there. So there's one report talks about Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu anh is the one who approached Umar al-Khattab, because Abu Ubaidah is the one who was besieging the city, while the other says Amr bin al-As. The more correct seems like the report is Sa'd Amr bin al-As, because Abu Ubaidah was busy with the other areas of the Syria or the Bilad al-Sham. And yes, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, he joined Amr bin al-As later on, but in the beginning it was Amr bin al-As and the other generals who were surrounding Jerusalem. But remember one thing here though, which is an important aspect of it, that when the people of Jerusalem or Bayt al-Maqdis, they were giving up the city or the control of it, it was not just they wrote a letter to Umar al-Khattab to come and just take over Bayt al-Maqdis. Rather, the Muslims were surrounding the city, and the siege was going on. And after 44 months of siege, and the Muslim armies were there, this is the time that they approached the Muslims and they wanted to get out of the siege, and they were willing to give the control to the Muslims. Now, as I said, there are reports that talk about even like this, that Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, he sent, this is by Ibn Athir, he says Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, he sent an army of 35,000 and they were divided among the 7 different generals, and each general was coming with 5,000 army of 5,000, and he was sending one group at a time. So one day, 5,000 were left towards Al-Quds, and then the next day, the next 5,000. So this way, the 7,000 were sent, and Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah himself also left along with them. So that means that 7 consecutive days, those 7 generals were left to reach Beit al-Maqdis. And this is one of the tactics that we see in the past as well, that was used to kind of overwhelm the enemy, because enemy sees that they have reinforcement continuously coming. So to see the reinforcement coming for 7 consecutive days with such a large number, 5,000, even though altogether it's 35,000, and to compare with the other armies, sometimes they were over 100,000, 140,000, but even then, this gives a different impression. The effect is different on the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why these generals, they were using these kind of different tactics. So one of the reports talk about Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah is the one who came, and then Abu Ubaidah is the one who talked to, who sent the letter to Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu to come and strike a deal. Now, what it says is, well, the reports talk about that Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he came to the area called Jabiyah, and he stayed there, and then he made the deal with the people of Jerusalem. So before I go into that, there's one story that is mentioned about Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, is when he was traveling down to Al-Quds to strike the deal, he was with his slave or servant, and they were on a ride, and they used to switch the ride. So there was one ride and 2 people. And Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he was even asked, when you go there, you dress nicely. And because the Romans are famous to have, the Byzantines were famous to be dressed up and all fancy stuff they used to do. So they were saying to Umar, you should go in the same way. Umar was, he went in his regular clothes that he normally wears. It has patches also, and different reports talk about the number of patches he had on his clothes. And there was one ride, and Umar and his servant was sharing the ride. So one time Umar would sit in the ride, and the servant would walk, and then Umar would walk, and he would sit in the ride. And then when they get to the doors of the Al-Quds, it was a time for his servant to be on the ride and Umar to be walking. And his servant told Umar, why don't you get on the ride? But Umar refused, and he came like as is at the doors of the Al-Quds. And when they met Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, they recognized Umar by the way he entered, meaning he was the one walking and his servant was the one who was on the right. And the number of patches even were mentioned in their books about the person who will conquer or take over the Al-Quds would be the one whose dress would have that many number of patches. So these are different reports are mentioned about that. But regardless of all these reports, we should not lose our focus that the way that Al-Quds was open, it was the army was sitting there. There was a siege happening for 4 months, and they were giving in to that siege. And now after that, they're striking the deal with Umar. That's a separate issue, but it's still it's a force was used. Hence, we see that when he went there and he struck the deal, we can see that the peace treaty was signed, and the peace treaty talks about how the Muslims will be dealing with the non-Muslims. And this is very important, and I will read through the treaty document because the document has some of the things that needs more of a, not the clarity, but for us to remember who's the one who really taught the world how to coexist. It's the Muslims, actually. Muslims showed the mankind basically that you can live with equal rights with the rest of the citizens in the country, even though you may be follower of a different religion, as we will see here. So this document is taken from At-Tabari, and it says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is what the servant of Allah Umar, the Amir al-Mu'mineen, has granted to the people of Elia or Jerusalem, as we say, of security. So that security is given. He has granted them security for themselves, their possessions, their churches and crosses, their sick and healthy, and all their co-religionists. Their churches shall not be taken for residence and shall not be demolished. Nothing shall be damaged from them or from their surroundings, nor shall their crosses be removed or anything taken from their property. They shall not be harassed because of their religion, and none of them shall be harmed. No Jew will be allowed to live with them in Elia. The people of Elia will have to pay jizya as the inhabitants of other cities pay. They have to expel them from Elia, the Byzantines and thieves. Those of them who leave shall have security for themselves and their belongings until they reach a place of safety. But anything from among them who wants to stay in Elia shall be safe, provided they pay jizya like the people of Elia. If any of the people of Elia want to leave with the Byzantines and their belongings will be with them, they and their churches and crosses shall be safe until they reach a place of safety. Any of the people of the land who were in Elia before the slaying of its last leader shall have the option of either staying, provided they pay the jizya, like the people of Elia, or if they so wish, they will be allowed to leave with the Byzantines or go back to their original homes. No jizya will be collected from them until they are able to pay it. The promise of Allah may be exalted. He, Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Khalifa, and the believers is therefore given to abide by the terms of this treaty as long as the people pay the jizya. Now, and this was witnessed by Khalid bin Walid, Amr bin al-As, Abdul Rahman bin Auf, and Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, written in the year 15 after Hijrah. So that's the document that was written at that time. Now, this document, as I was saying, it is important for us to just discuss that for a few minutes, this document, that how Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh provided the security and safety for the people who continue to live in a that in the area of Al-Quds, the Jews were not allowed. That's the treaty that the Christians of that time, they wanted to have with the Muslims when they were making the treaty. So peace treaties, this is a peace treaty that they were making. And peace treaties are as one of the things which is part of the foreign policy of the Islamic State. And that's what Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh was doing. Now here, when we talk about all the time about the coexistence, in reality, Muslims are the one, throughout the history we can see, were the one who started this or showed that mankind that really how to coexist with different religions. And throughout, from the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam until the last Islamic State was fallen, we can see that there were people from different religions, they lived in a very safe and secure environment under Islam. Islam was protecting them. As we talked about, Ahlul Dhimma are the people. They're referred as Ahlul Dhimma if they don't accept Islam and they want to live under the rule of Islam, then they become Ahlul Dhimma, meaning they are the responsibility of the state to take care of them. Of course, they have to pay the jizya. And we have talked about the whole issue of jizya in the past. Just to give very briefly to remind the listeners that when we talk about the jizya, jizya is a tax that's been taken from the non-Muslims who are living in the state, but that amount is actually much less than the people who are living under the state who are Muslims, and they have to give the zakah as a part of the ibadah that they have to pay if they are eligible. And same way about even the people who are paying the jizya, if they are not capable. And jizya is taken per head per year by the male who is able, not the one who is not able, the one who is old and they cannot work or anything, then he is actually come under the state to take care of them anyways. So it's per head and they have to pay a very small amount, different areas according to the region. And if it's a wealthy region, it was taken like up to like 4 dinar was probably the max. or somebody was 2 dinar per year, or 1 dinar per year. And dinar is 4.25 grams of gold. For the whole year, we're talking about. Now, if you compare that to the amount of taxes people pay, that's this is nothing that the people are paying for as a jizya. Now, on the other side, the Muslims have to pay, which is a part of the ibadah, and that goes, it's not like a tax, but the zakat the Muslims pay, which is 2.5% of their whole year's saving, which is called the things on which the zakat applies, which could be the inventory of their, for example, they are doing a business, or they have gold or silver, they have live stocks and stuff like that. So they pay 2.5%, depending on what we are talking about, meaning what kind of a product we are discussing. So it could be on the land as well, which is called the ushr. Ushr is only taken from the Muslims. It's not taken from the non-Muslims either. So what I'm trying to say here is, sometimes people talk about this idea of, oh, the non-Muslims are, the jizya is collected from them. To be very clear, yes, the jizya is collected from the Muslims, from the non-Muslims, but at the same time, that is because of then after that they are given protection from all sorts of insecurities otherwise they may face. So this is what it means by the jizya. Now, moving forward, other thing was Muslims continue to live under, non-Muslims continue to live under Islamic lands throughout the centuries. And there is no compulsion for them to accept Islam. The people who became Muslim in those lands, that was because of when they saw what Islam provides, what Islam offers, what Islam is about, when they saw Islam in action. This is why they accepted Islam. It was never been the case that the people were forced to become Muslim. And even in this area of Al-Quds, even until today, after Muslims ruled for 13 centuries, even in that area, you still find Christian Arabs who've been living there for centuries. There are places like India, for example, Indian subcontinent. Muslims ruled for about 800 years. Mm-hmm. And through those 800 years, after the rule was over, Indian subcontinent's majority was still non-Muslim. And we will find similar kind of cases, whether it's area of Shaam besides Palestine, you can see that today's Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, you can still find the Christians continue to live. Even Jews continue to live there. Iran, you can go there and you can find different religions that continue to exist there. So Islam did not force people to leave their deen and accept Islam. It was always the choice of the people that was given to them. So coexistence was more of, Islam is the one who showed the people how to coexist. Okay, so that's that. Well, besides that, let's talk about just very quickly about Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, when Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, when he visited, and then inshallah we'll finish today's talk. When Umar al-Khattab came to Syria, he said to Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah, he said, let's go to your house. Now, keep in mind, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah was the governor of Syria. When we say he was a governor at that time. Now, he said, Abu Ubaidah said, what will you do at my house? All you will do is weep for me. And Umar entered the house and did not see anything. And he said, where is your furniture? And I do not see anything but a saddle, a plate, a water skin, and you are the governor? Do you have any food? He's asking, do you even have food? This is a governor from the Muslims. Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah went to a basket and took out some pieces of bread. And Umar bin Khattab, radiallahu anh, he started crying. Abu Ubaidah said to him, I told you that you would weep for me. When you look at what I have, basically. O Amir al-Mu'mineen, whatever gets you to your destination is enough. And Umar's response was, this world has changed us all except you, O Abu Ubaidah. Subhanallah. That was, when we talk about, today, we talk about zuhud or asceticism, or sometimes the people who have ruhaniya and they are ruhani people. The only thing come to your mind is, Oh, he is sitting in a corner under the bush or something, doing nothing, just doing the worshipping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Look at Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah. When it comes to worldly things, he had nothing with him. But at the same time, he is the one who is conquering the world, taking the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the whole world. That's what he was. That's what it means by zuhud. Zuhud is not leave the dunya and go sit in the corner and do nothing, but worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Zuhud is this, that you live in the world, do all the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us, carry the message of Islam. Yes, you sacrifice whatever you can in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the zuhud is. And according to a report narrated from Hisham ibn Urwa, he said Umar came to, his father said, Umar came to Syria and was met by commanders of the troops and the leaders of the local people. Umar asked, where is my brother? They said, who? He said, Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah. They said, he is coming now. He came on a camel and greeted him with salam. Then he said to the people, leave us alone. He walked with him until he came to his house. And then he stayed with him and did not see anything in his house except his sword, shield, and a saddle. Just giving the different reports about Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah. The one that we have been continuously talking when we are talking about Shaam was opened by Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah. Or of course, there's nothing done by alone like that. He's the one who was leading. And there were different Sahaba who was there to help Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah. But the way Abu Ubaidah bin Jarrah radiallahu anh, was living his life, that speaks a lot about the character why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam referred to him as the Aminul Ummah, the trustworthy one of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So we'll stop our talk here today, inshallah, and we'll continue about the Libya and other parts next week, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. If there are any questions or comments, inshallah,